Thank you for joining us for today's Facebook Live. We really appreciate it. Welcome to the live, everybody. I hope you're doing well. So today, my name is Rachel and I'm here with Charlie from Salesfire. And today we're going to be talking about how to sell online in a turbulent world. So obviously with a lot of things going on, Brexit, COVID, all the restrictions, it's been really hard for business owners. And we're going to be exploring some different ways that you can sell online, how to reach your ideal customers, and ultimately how to grow your business. So Charlie, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, first of all?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Rachel. So yeah, I'm Charlie from Salesfire. Those who don't know us, we provide intelligent solutions to optimize your customer journey. So that's through kind of acquirement, inspiration, influencing through our products, whether that's on-site optimization through visually similar, voice search to behavioral overlays. And as you say, over the last 12 months, I think it's kind of been more important now than ever to kind of, for retailers and for e-commerce, how we can kind of promote those products and support their customer journey as well.
Yeah, wonderful, thank you. So if you do have any questions for Charlie or myself about selling online, if you pop them in the comments below, we'll try and get to them nearer the end. Or even if you're watching this back on the recorded version, if you pop the comments below, somebody will get back to you with hopefully a really useful answer. So let's get started with the first one. So obviously a lot of things have changed over the past 12 months, but in your opinion, kind of what has changed the way people sell over the past 12 months? Like what's changed for them in the way that they sell?
Yeah, so I think for me, firstly, who would believe we'd still be in the thick of that situation and word that's COVID? I think, back in March or back at the start of last year, especially the first 3 weeks of those lockdown, a lot of businesses, kind of put on hold certain channels and strategies of how they currently sell. And, even up to today, kind of their main channels, from where their revenue stream would come from has changed dramatically, whether that's in terms of budgets for ad spend or for even events that have moved online. So I think it's, it was really kind of detrimental at the start of it. And I think for me, we're continuing that, but I think there's been a lot of kind of crisis strategies that we've looked at. So I think for me, how businesses have changed over the last 12 months, especially kind of speaking to networks or, clients at Salesfire, I think first of all was more kind of the supplier and the operation side of things. So businesses have experienced, I guess some, one point or another, say delays in delivery. There was the beast from the east, the northeast a few years ago, where the snow just totally changed how businesses could operate. But the fact that, back in March, this was, put on a hold across businesses, B2B, B2C, e-commerce as a whole, and nobody kind of had the answer to, well, how do you sell now? What do you do? What do you do with your ad spend? How do you make the most to reach out to those customers? So I think, for me personally, for our business and kind of e-commerce retailers is having that, that crisis strategy in place. Some businesses and how they sell and how they communicate to their customers, would have been using channels like email and social in the past, but probably not to this certain extent. Emails became a huge channel to a lot of companies, promoting kind of, saying to their customers how they're going to educate them and, get them through this together. So I think there's been, in terms of a crisis strategy now, I think a lot of businesses know they need to have one in place and how to be reactive with that as well. I think, in terms of how businesses, are selling is, a lot of businesses will have a campaign or a product strategy of what particular categories and products they want to push on their platforms throughout the year. That would have just been thrown up back in March. There's certain categories, who would have known would have removed kind of fashion, dresses and bikinis that, from the seasonal launch that they've bought in, ready to put on their site, to loungewear and garden items to experience the sun in their own back gardens. Thank God some of us had a heat wave as well back in like April and May. So I think it's really important how businesses sell is more kind of the inventory and the stock that they have and how they can kind of make the most of them products to fulfill the user based on the situation analysis around them. You know, who would have thought would have seen the day where ASOS and Reese, you know, as we're scrolling through the categories, we would experience, you know, seeing face masks is kind of a normal thing. You know, we've got, you know, people actually pushing new products that they never thought they would promote before. So I think that's kind of been a massive one. I guess, you know, for your clients, especially, you know, of how their categories have changed on their platform. I think how businesses sell, like kind of a big one that we've experienced in the news and we still are, is unfortunately with the closures of stores. You know, it's kind of really hit home actually these last few weeks with, you know, the temporarily closed in the UK at the moment. And unfortunately for some retailers, you know, the shut for good. You know, we've seen in the news this week about Debenhams being acquired as well. And the rumours with ASOS purchasing, you know, Topshop, but not kind of, you know, for their store, but for their online presence and also kind of their customer data as well. So for me, it's kind of how businesses sell is, you know, once, you know, fingers crossed, whenever we do, we start to kind of come out of this lockdown and shoppers go back to the high street, is how, you know, they sell offline and how they use that space to then kind of actually bring into the customer journey online as well, through kind of the omni-channel. And I think from that with the stores as well, I know there's some people where lockdown lifts, some people are not going to be comfortable going back into stores straight away. And I think people need to realise that, especially when they're creating kind of their strategy. It's all about, you know, for how people sell, it's the safety of their, you know, their staff's being at the forefront, but also the safety of their customers. So how self-serve in certain click and collect, you know, how can retailers use that for their platform? And have actually been trialled and tested over the last 12 months to how they can use that moving forwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a lot of changes over the past
Yes.
12 months, and a lot of business owners have had to adapt really quickly, pivot their businesses, you know, in lots of different directions to kind of make sure that they're still able to run as well as they can with the restrictions in place. So it's been a very weird 12 months, and we don't even know how long this is going to go on till. So
No.
yeah. But you kind of touched on that a little bit, the next question a little bit in that what you just said, but obviously with lockdown happening, Brexit, the restrictions, a lot of things have changed, but a lot of things have also been trending. So what kind of trends have you seen over the past 12 months with regards to selling?
Yeah, so there's kind of three trends that I would kind of highlight from the last 12 months. I think, you know, the first one I spoke about in a Salesfire webinar back in October. And for me, this should have no kind of outside influence, no matter what's happening with Brexit and in COVID. The first one being empathy. So for me, for those who are aware of kind of Mary Portas and the Kindness Economy podcast that she launched a few weeks ago, from a buyer perspective, it's more kind of people are being more deliberate and mindful of how they're living now in every situation they do. And it's the same with buying as well. People are being more mindful of how they shop online. And I think it's how you link commercialism and social progress together. And I think that's where businesses can really enhance on empathy. So for, you know, we've seen empathy campaigns for the last 12 months. You know, retailers have been doing it through the use of their platform and through, you know, email and different channels online, to big campaigns working with, you know, promoting the NHS and certain charities. There's one, I think it was a few weeks ago, Burger King, for instance, has actually let loose on their Instagram kind of access to independent food retailers to actually promote their business using their Instagram channel. And I think that's, you know, it's really nice to see that that's continuing, and I hope that trend actually continues in 2021, no matter what the outside influence is. And for me, empathy, you know, that example, you don't have to have a huge online, you know, brand presence, or, you know, be known as a retailer, or have to work with a partner or anything like that. It's more how you can actually utilize empathy throughout that customer journey and utilize the tools that you've got online to communicate with those customers. You know, we're all in the same boat, no matter whether we're working a business or not. And it's kind of, what's the situation? What are they feeling and thinking and doing while they're on your website? I think for me, kind of the second trend is efficiency. So there's kind of two different kind of ways I see efficiency is from an internal operations perspective, kind of from my job role, is how to make the most of the tools that you actually have. So I guess, Rachel, for kind of your customers, especially the last 12 months, is looking at, right, what features and functionality can I use on my platform that maybe I've never looked at before, or maybe never got the most out before, to make sure that I'm communicating to those customers as well. And that's been a big one for us internally, everything, from video marketing, automation, and that doesn't really stop there for retailers also. And for me, from a Salesfire perspective, and a lot of, customers and the landscape in general, is kind of taking the hands of kind of artificial intelligence. So how they're using artificial intelligence through kind of their search engines, through recommendations. You've got a whole pot of data that you can use at your disposal, but it's actually how can you use that data and artificial intelligence and actually inspire and influence customers on your platform to help them make a decision. I think that's been a huge kind of efficiency's been a huge one for Salesfire over the last 12 months. And not just that, but a lot of our customers as well, especially maybe with the reduced number of hours or reduced number of staff that they've had. And I think is another trend, last but not least, is, new segments of data. There's, now like the brick and mortar shops have shut, especially around the Black Friday period, which e-commerce just boomed around that time. Is, we've got new customers who might have only say used the part of the customer journey. Maybe they wanted to shop in a store to still experience that, the feel, the touch of maybe high price ticket items, and use the website maybe to convert, maybe if they had like a feature or functionality for buy now, pay later. Or some new customers who've never actually shopped online before, especially with certain personas and age groups. So for me, I think, the trends is we've seen a lot of, brands actually, building the trust and loyalty. And I think that's where retention, your retention strategy's got to be so strong for those new segments. I feel, a lot of people have relied on, year-on-year trending data themselves, or looking at year-on-year trend data, across the board. But it's going to be different this year. Everything was shaken up in e-commerce, and I think it's going to still continue for the rest of 2021.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying there. There's got to be some way that people adapt and change, and sort of maybe are a bit more proactive with the trends that are sort of like up and coming. Because I've seen social media platforms like TikTok influencing online buying trends. So, Netflix with the latest series of Bridgerton, increased corset sales on Amazon and eBay and Etsy. And so there are things like that you need to probably keep your ear to the ground with going forward. And if you do sell those products that are on trending sort of trends on social media or Netflix or things like that, you need to be jumping on them.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot over the past 12 months, a lot of the main ways people sell have changed, unfortunately, with sort of like the closure of brick and mortar stores, like you were saying. And we saw a lot of businesses trying to quickly pivot from brick and mortar to online when everything was shut last year. Some of them did it successfully, some of them maybe not so much. But obviously, with the majority of people going, I mean, Anthony's been saying it for years that online is where it's at, essentially. And everybody needs to be selling online. But now that everybody is, there's a lot more competition, and a lot more saturation of some markets and things like that. But what main ways do you think people need to be selling online? Obviously, we always push that if you have your own shop, you are in control of your own branding and your own products, and lots of other benefits to that, reduced fees and stuff. But is there any other sort of like maybe somewhere, a different channel that people need to be paying attention to where opportunities lie?
Yes, I think it all goes down to, if you've got a brick and mortar store, I think no matter, what's happening over the last 12 months is how you can replicate the in-store assistance online. I think, for me especially, I'm missing the stores. I wasn't really I'm a more of a browser online, even when the stores were open. But I love the try before you buy, going in, trying certain, for jeans, for instance, certain categories, you like to buy more than one pair based on the size and the style. So I think it's more, how can you, replicate that? So you're getting a lot of buy now, pay later kind of, providers there. People are utilizing those a lot more, especially for gifts. And when I kind of go through kind of replicating that in-store assistance online, is people still like to experience the customer service side, that face-to-face, that interaction. And there's a lot of retailers now that are using kind of, messaging, especially for people who maybe are not used to shopping online, to kind of fulfill their solution, whether it's looking for a particular product, the information at their fingertips. It's been so important. I think customer service, and especially when I kind of go back to empathy, is trying to fulfill the needs of them. Whether that's from, you could walk into a store over 12 months ago, pick up an item, go to the till, you've purchased, you've actually got that item there and then. Where, for online, it's being flexible with the options for your customers, whether they want it the next day, in 5 days' time. What's the returns policy based on kind of these restrictions? If they're unable to get out the house to the post office to return, rather than just the post office, is the other kind of return kind of procedures that they can follow as well. And I think it's flexibility and having that option has been so important. And I think businesses are realizing that before, where kind of not one solution fits all. And as you say, Rachel, kind of one of the key channels, especially for us, that we've not noticed for communication perspective, is utilizing kind of notifications and overlays on the website. So if stores are closed, people would normally go to the store and ask for information. Their first port of call is to visit that website to, find out what's happening, to fulfill the needs there. And, behavioral overlays, people, some people might see them as, oh, it's just promoting kind of data capture for the newsletter or to promote a certain offer. But we've seen, a lot of our customers and a lot of people out there are using it to update customers of what's happening with their delivery, educating them on what's actually happening and how they're supporting, as well as utilising it in search as well. So if they're kind of uncertain, if they're thinking and feeling, they might be browsing an item on kind of the platform and they're unsure about, well, I don't actually know if it's going to be delivered in time, say for Christmas, is having those quick links and those kind of options there at the right time when they're actually thinking and feeling that as well. So it's kind of, for me, communication is a massive thing. It's easy to ask somebody in store, but for online, you don't want them to hunt all over and to go 5 pages deep, or to not even have the option to speaking to somebody over voice. And I think that's been a big one. Another one as well, kind of off the side of that, just kind of, when I've been researching, is 1 in 5 people have signed up to a subscription since lockdown, which I thought was quite interesting. I think Disney, timed it nicely with the introduction of the new Disney app. I think it was in April or May. But a lot of people are relying on subscription models for food as well. The Tesco delivery savers, I've even invested in one of those and never thought I'd see the day that, I'd be trying to hunt down a delivery slot to make sure I don't have to go out. But it's a case if you don't even need to have a subscription model within, to even do that. It's more, it's communicating at the right time with that person. So it's looking at kind of based on the product that they've purchased, how long will it take to actually, where they might need it again, and to actually communicate that via email, to say, are they actually in need of this? So actually reaching out before them having to kind of go through that customer journey from the start.
Yeah, it's that next level of anticipating your customer needs, isn't it? And kind of making it so easy for them that they don't even think about it, and they're just like, oh yeah, place an order, I do need that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
definitely
quite
the prompt.
Yeah. So obviously a lot of things have changed, as I've said probably multiple times now. But do you have a few recommended ways that business owners should be using to reach their ideal customers now that everything's sort of changed?
Yeah, so I think what businesses should use for reach is, there's a number of channels out there, but I think it all comes back to the data. So for me, many decisions today in e-commerce is all based on data. And, I'm sure in some cases it's based on gut instinct as well. But I think we can be so overwhelmed with how much data we have at our disposal. And it's not a bad thing, but I think it's more kind of, information means nothing without context. So it's more, yes, you can reach your customers via email and via social, but it's actually looking at the data of kind of, how have you acquired them and when and how and what have they purchased, and using that, data to determine, when is the right time to communicate with them. So I think businesses need to look at the wider picture of data, and, they've got their own data, but also to utilize kind of key trends and information out there. So I think it's, we're a whole business network now. You've seen partners, alike, and platforms working together to support each other's customers as well. I think it's so important to kind of use all that information to help make business decisions. There was an example where I think it was a certain brand were promoting a heater for me just before Black Friday, and I had a certain budget gifts I wanted to kind of purchase at that time, but I really wanted one of these heaters. And it was more kind of, they, targeted me. I'd been on their site before, kind of looked at a particular product, and it was more, they were kind of promoting more of the buy now, pay later, for instance, and that kind of put on the cheeky message, as they know people are working from home, they can choose their own delivery slot or be quite flexible of how they want that delivered, and they don't have to be disturbed while working from home. And that was quite, the situation was, I think the clocks had just changed. They knew that people were looking to save to start for purchasing for Black Friday. And they've used that data and information and applied that with a certain tool on the platform to communicate that to me, which was relevant and the right time for me to convert. So I think it's a case of, if you are scared at looking at data of how to reach to customers, just think of it as you don't just have one audience and it fits all the same gap. You've got different personas based on different products or different categories that you promote on site. And they're all at different parts of the journey, and they're all looking for a certain, maybe a certain product, but they've all got different solutions, and, they need to fulfill needs as well. So it will help kind of reduce your bounce rates as well. You wouldn't just kind of slapdash, an overlay on the homepage or a certain category with one message. You would look at, are they existing, are they new? So I think it's, for me, is, use that data that you've got. And it's not just your own data, but use certain, trends and landscapes and what other people are seeing to help you make those decisions as well.
Yeah, some really great advice there. Thank you. I just wanted to touch on one thing that you kind of mentioned, and we've kind of covered it in a couple of our blogs and videos on EKM, but buy now, pay later was, for me, probably one of the biggest trends in e-commerce over the past 12 months. It's had a really big uplift in merchants sort of applying that on their shops and things like that. And there are a lot of different options now. PayPal has an option, Lay-by has an option. There's quite a few different ones out there for merchants to choose from. And I think that kind of speaks to how sort of like online shopping habits are changing. And I know a few weeks ago, Martin Lewis did say, it's maybe a little bit negative because it's not regulated and things like that. But
yeah,
I don't see it as a bad thing. I think it's good for the merchant. It's good for the customer if they can obviously keep on top of payments and things like that. But what's your opinion on buy now, pay later? Do you think it's going to take over the world, or do you think it's just going to be a bit of a fleeting trend?
Well, I think for me, when I first heard of buy now, pay later, a few years ago, it was more, at first, I was a bit unsure, for me, as a person, well, I don't want it, people thought of it, as a store card or credit or anything like that. I wasn't educated in it. And I think, it started off with a lot of millennials and, certain audience starting to use those methods. For me, I think it's a great opportunity, as I kind of touched upon on one of the questions previously, is the flexibility. So, certain people want to pay in certain ways. They want items delivered in certain ways. And I think, especially if it's a high price ticket item, such as, you're doing your flooring or you're gardening out as we're still in lockdown, is, people are going to be saving because they're not going on holiday, but maybe they want to split that in 3 payments, so it's not kind of a hole in their pocket straight away. And I think it's really good to have that flexibility and, to promote that on site. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only method that you can promote on site, but I think it's great for the customer to see all those options on there, but also important to educate them on what that means for them and what's the benefits of it as well. And I think we've started to see, especially over the last year, a lot more kind of from the platform and a lot more channels promoting buy now, pay later. And it's starting to reach different audiences as well as it starts to grow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on. And if you don't already have an option, a buy now, pay later option on your online shop, have a good think about it, because it is a great way, especially if you've got like higher value products on your website and things like that. So if we have maybe new or established businesses that are struggling to maybe sell online right now, maybe they're not getting the traffic they want or the sales that they want, do you have any advice for them about how they can maybe increase their chances of getting sales?
Well, I think kind of a takeout for all businesses is, from the start of 2020 to now, the whole, planning and communication strategy has been up in the air, and it's still very overwhelming for us all. So, we're all in the same boat in some way. But for me, that, well-versed strategies that, some brands might have had, when they were selling well, is being thrown up. And I think, we have seen some retailers, I think not now, I think lessons have been learned, but as like this continues, you can't keep using, COVID. I hate, using the C word in any webinars or anything like that, but we can't, keep using COVID as a pure excuse for reasons, of not satisfying the customer in a communication strategy. So it's time to flip the script and realize we're in their world also. So as much as you can have a well-versed strategy and, a channel plan and a campaign plan, is to make sure you have that crisis strategy in place and to make sure that you can be reactive as you can be. For me, I think that's been so important, because some people have kind of just been so kind of, either at first continuing business as usual, which might have worked for some. But I think it's, for me over the last 12 months, and I think you should still do now, is exploring a number of tools, making sure that you can be efficient with the tools you've got. So for instance, certain platforms, what settings and features and functionality do you have there that you might have not explored before that could even help a certain segment? So I think it's making the most of what you've got. And also kind of when I went back to the data, is for kind of new businesses, is looking at those who have converted. Kind of, you can use certain tools such as overlays or even email or any preferences of, why did they purchase from you? How did they find their experience? And actually apply that feedback and data back to the start of the customer journey to improve it further. So I think it's a case of, not just kind of sending a communication message out of this is what's happening now, this is why, is, listen to your customers, actually find out what they want, how they found, maybe certain tools or a certain channel. And, they're the ones who use it day in, day out. So kind of take advantage of that.
Yeah, wonderful. And I just wanted to touch upon this crisis strategy that you mentioned a few times now. For business owners who might not have one in place, where would you suggest that they start?
I think it's more looking at, for a crisis strategy, is looking, internally from everything, from their website, from their operations, each kind of touch point that you have with a customer. So from your website, if somebody comes on, when they first come on, they might actually want to look on your website for some information. So it's making sure that you have any certain notifications of that information right in front of them, whether that's kind of, through the navigation, through the search, through the footer. So it's making sure that you've got a most recent up-to-date kind of communications plan in front of your customers. And I think what's so important with any business is to have, make sure that you relay that back to your internal team as well. Make sure that your customer service team know actually what's happening, that you're speaking to your customers as well. So if there is any calls, that are being put through, the message is consistent and the same. And I think it's, you've got customers everywhere in terms of who've purchased you on site. who you might actually only engage with you through social as well. And you've got an email, your email strategy there. So it's more just not just communicating through your website, but also using other marketing tools to reach out to those as well. So it's kind of using kind of your overall e-commerce strategy and the different touch points and how you can communicate with them effectively.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really helpful advice, I think. It kind of brings us on to sort of our next question, which is advice on how to adjust when the selling landscape changes. And I know you've touched on a few things there, but I think mine would be don't panic, first of all, because it'll always change. You'll always have to adjust. This has just been a bit more of a quicker change, more impactful change over the past 12 months. So do you have any additional advice for that?
I think we've all learned not to panic as much as we did in March. I think, nobody could help that either. I think it's more, for me, is, we can't treat this just like a switch. It's not a on or off. Unfortunately, we're in our third lockdown now for some of us. We've kind of learnt our lessons. We've trialed and tested tools, and I think to continue that and keep applying, the feedback and results we're getting from there. So I think in terms of adjustment, don't just think of it as, right, this is my recovery strategy while we're in lockdown, and just to kind of forget about that and to move on to business as usual as if my store opens. Is, for me, for businesses, is more the omni-channel experience. Is going, right, okay, how can I, replicate, the in-store assistance online, but how can the both channel, actually talk to each other and communicate? So whether, people rely on your website or your store when it's open, or both, that's always going to be seamless no matter what. And I think for adjusting the landscape now, I think, I read somewhere 56% of consumers are actually preferring to actually visit the website during the kind of, from the experience of the pandemic, because they've got more exposure to products and, customers and clients. They've actually got, people have actually put more reviews on websites, so it's kind of like a customer forum. So I think it's, to make the most of that. And in terms of adjustment, is to not just switch off a channel or a feature or functionality just because of the sake of it. Is how can you be more efficient and use that tool and channel moving forwards, and kind of take the benefit of that also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. So that kind of brings us on to our final question, and we will be taking questions in the comments after this as well. So if you do have any, make sure to pop them in the comments and I'll read them out in a minute. So finally, how can business owners leverage their business above their competitors and stand out no matter what platform they're selling on?
Oh, so for competitors, I think this has been a whole new shift, especially with the movement online, where people have had to, not really out of force, but have had to actually identify new brands that they might have not actually, purchased from before or even heard. I think I was in panic mode and I purchased from, I think it was a subscription butchers, from down south, which I would have never used before, but I had to rely on their website and their communications to kind of, build that trust within like a certain period before I purchased. So I think from a competitor perspective, one key takeout for me in terms of the customer journey is retention. So I think when we go back to these new segments that we've discovered, throughout COVID, and, we've never had before, is, they've came to you and, purchased from your site, whether that's the first time they've purchased, or, they've known you before, but haven't actually converted through your website, is to retain those through the different, for the different tools to educate them, so they don't move on to competitors. I think, for them, you could really build them into ambassadors, and for them to actually say, oh, I've discovered this brand during lockdown, they fulfilled my needs, they knew what kind of solution and situation I was in. And word of mouth, is priceless, really. So I think it's, word of mouth's been a massive one, especially for local businesses as well. And Facebook people relied on. So I think it's, for me, is don't just treat them as, any other customer, is to kind of take that segment away, and how you can kind of adapt that moving forwards. I think, for me, businesses and competition, yeah, it's been quite, eventful over the last 12 months, but it's more how you can, it's more about people care and customers care more about the sustainability and the communities. So I think it's all about your brand presence as well. So as well as your retention is kind of what are you doing and giving back. That doesn't mean that you have to partner with somebody huge or join, a certain charity, but it's more like how can you fulfill and how are you kind of supporting the situation that everybody's in right now. And for kind of for competition as well and providing information to those customers, we have a certain campaign that a lot of our customers use throughout lockdown, because it did get quite, it is quite stressful when there's a lot of new competitors on the market, I guess, that have come online, is title highlights. It's more about promoting your kind of unique selling points of why they should purchase from you, whether that's they've got the option of a buy now pay later method against their competitor. Do they have flexible delivery items, and do they provide maybe additional customer support after they've purchased that item from for a number of days after.
Yeah, thank you so much, Charlie. There's been a lot of information in this live already, and we're only sort of half an hour in. So I'll give you a little water break, and I'll kind of glance over some of the questions that we've got. We've got a few in across our Facebook and our YouTube. So I'll just start with the first one from Andrew, who says, I haven't made my first sale yet. What is your advice to get that first sale and get more traffic to my site?
So I think it's for me, so in terms of your website is, think of it when I mentioned before about the empathy and the different points of the customer journey. So it's looking at, right, how can I acquire customers? So looking at your website is the different ways, you could fulfill with having an email capture on your footer, moving through to your category pages, look at those, how can you actually make the most? So just think of it in terms of kind of a little bit of a case study for yourself. So when you go on a certain website, what are you thinking and feeling at that point? What is your actual goal? And look at kind of the different stages of how you work through your website and making sure that it's actually easy and you've got the information in place to make that purchase. And I think it's really important when that purchase is made is to make sure you've got that data and all the tracking set up to identify what actually attributed to that sale. Was it a certain channel that helped? Was it a certain point in the journey, certain item on the product or category page? And use that to kind of help, not just retain them, but just to start to build those sales up as well.
Wonderful. I hope that answers your question, Andrew. We have another one on YouTube from Connor, who says, a very important part of being online is to provide your customers with a good delivery service. With something that's largely out of your control, how can I deal with longer shipping times?
Yes, I think we've seen this, especially at the start of the year with kind of retailers, and I hate using the word Brexit, but I think it's more is using the information kind of out there and to make sure that you're up to date and making sure that any couriers that you use, how are they supporting businesses? I think it's important to have that partnership as well, and understanding and making sure that they're working with you as well. And actually to communicate that information to your customers. I know it's been quite a strange time in January, as well as kind of the outside influence of COVID for Brexit in kind of deliveries to happen. I think it's really important to kind of use that information and then flip it from kind of an operations point of view on how you're actually supporting your customers to provide them with that delivery solution.
Yeah, I think communication is definitely key when it comes to that, because as long as I think I've always heard and found that as long as you're communicating with the customer to let them know that there's a problem, apologize for any inconvenience caused, they're a lot more understanding than if they are to not hear from you at all, and have to like chase you up on where their order is if there's a delay. So communication is definitely a top priority.
Yeah, we've seen, I think it was the start of the year, there was a lot of websites with notifications on, whether that was through an overlay or kind of, on the sticky header. I even received a few emails of how they are changing their delivery policy and process. And even though, certain policies, it's not the most exciting thing to read from a customer, but it just shows you how they're adapting to the landscape and they're putting changes in place. So you kind of trust them based on how they're adapting to the landscape and how they're going to support their customers to fulfill their needs.
Yeah, Okay, and we'll just move on to the questions on the Facebook now. So I have another one here that says, like the idea of building trust and loyalty, especially for people who don't usually shop small online. Any ideas for this?
Yeah, I think it's for those who don't normally, shop online. For those, is making sure that you kind of, when I mentioned replicating the in-store assistance online, is trying to mirror that as best as you can on the shop. I think for some it can be so daunting to, go on a website, and maybe even purchase a high ticket item, like I've said before. And those who are not really sure of your website and kind of the customer journey, is to make sure you've got that support there, whether that's through kind of messenger, whether you can provide them with kind of more people are using video more, so you can actually speak to someone, see someone face to face. And it's been a great time, and it should be anyway, no matter what the outside influence is, to make sure your frequently asked questions are all up to date and you're promoting those as well. I think for somebody to go onto a website who's not normally used to shopping online before can be so daunting to look at it, and they don't even know where to start. So it all goes back to utilising an empathy map, which we can go into more detail or kind of share later on. Is as soon as they go on the website, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? And what are they saying? And what are they doing at that time based on the product that they're looking for? So always have that in your mind when somebody's actually going to visit your site, and what communication and what tools they would expect in the store to be actually at kind of your online shop window.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. Maria also asks, would you have any ideas if customers are coming to your site, the traffic is there, but the conversions aren't happening? Any ideas that could be looked at why that would be?
Yeah, so kind of when I previously mentioned, I think it was on the first question, is to look at kind of the customer journey, whether that's through your Google Analytics or through kind of the platform, is if your traffic's there, kind of what tools are you using to support them to get them through the next stage. But what I'd probably do first is look at maybe where they're dropping off or where they're bouncing from. So is it in terms of, certain ads? Are they bouncing off that based on the message from that ad to the website? Or are they actually the traffic's coming through, but you're not providing them with the full picture or solution on maybe a product page to actually get them to add to the cart and to buy? So I think my first one is to identify where they're actually dropping out in that funnel. And then from there, you can look at, for instance, if it is the product page, is there not enough product description on there? Could you actually educate them and support them, maybe using a sizing guide? I think that's a big one. People are unsure of, what size to get, and they can drop off. So it's kind of looking at those different stages from your homepage, your category, your product to your basket and checkout. Identify where they're dropping off, and then what tools you can use, whether that's optimizing your site search, using an overlay on a category or a product page to actually fulfill their needs and for them to actually move across that next part of the journey.
Yeah. I can see there are quite a few questions from Ria, but I think Wayne is maybe tackling one or two of them. So I'll just finish with one last question. She says, any suggestions for small businesses? What advice do you have for smaller businesses who don't have the funds for bigger strategies? Would there be anything that we could do ourselves?
Yeah, I think for me, in terms of, budgets, I think, whether you had the budget last year or, there's been budget restrictions as well, is there are channels that you're able to utilize that, maybe certain channels throughout the time of the year. I think for me, email could be a huge one in terms of the return on investment. So I think it's, for every pound you spend on email, you get, I think it's around 40 or 42 pounds back now. So for me, I think email is a key one because you can communicate with those. So I think it's all about, for your website, is making sure that you've got the data capture and an acquisition strategy. And from there, you will kind of build an audience up and you'll be able to communicate with them at that time, whether that's through promotions, educating them, keeping them warm and keeping them engaged. And I think email is a huge one. Organically through social as well. It's all about using your website and your platform and kind of, drawing them to different channels for different stages. So I think it's, once you've got all these core platforms set up, and especially email is kind of fulfilling the needs and especially kind of taking advantage of those.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. I think we'll end the live there because we've come to the end of all of our questions, the majority of our questions. If there are any other questions after the live, we'll try and get back to them afterwards as well. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us. Your wisdom's been amazing, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers have found real benefit in it. So thank you so much again. Oh, maybe she's frozen. Oh, there we go. Maybe just a little connection error. Yeah.
No, that's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And if anybody viewing is looking for any resources or anything like that, there's loads of advice on our blog. It's just ecom.com/blog. We've got lots of YouTube videos as well, giving advice on how to sell online and things like that. And obviously Salesfire, they give out loads of advice on their social media channels and blog as well. So make sure to go and check them out as well. And thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one. All right, goodbye.
Thank you.